not sure if everyone has figured this out yet, but there is a method to my madness when it comes to what I deem a side quest or a full episode. For the most part, full episodes, like this one, are games that are fully available to the public. No closed betas, no invite-only games, regardless of how easy it is to get that said invite. No translation patches in order to play some game that's not published in an English-speaking market. Just games where you head to the site, install, and play. So why did I do the game that I'm about to review as a side quest when it was freely available as an open beta? Well...
What are you doing?
Nothing. What does it look
You're
like?
laying down. Oh my god. Here, move around. Walk towards me and stuff and walk around.
Let's just say it wasn't entirely ready yet. This is the MMO Grinder, and it's time to look at Dragon's Prophet. Developed by Runewaker Entertainment, the same people behind the popular MMO Runes of Magic, and published by SOE in North America and Infernum in Europe, Dragon's Prophet is a 3D fantasy action MMO that uses reticle-style combat, just without the reticle. The major draw of this game is the ability to obtain dragons not only as pets, but mounts, combat partners, and crafting assistants. Dragon's Prophet was set to launch on September 18th, which is the excuse I was making for taking so long to finish War Thunder. But of course, the alpha-level bugs and issues still prevalent from even its open beta, SOE did an unsurprising but honorable thing, admitting the game wasn't ready for its launch date on September 18th, and delaying the project without announcing a new launch date, allowing them the time to make sure that the game was the best that they had to offer before they truly released the game to the general public. So they launched the game 5 days later. The story of Dragon's Prophet puts you in the role of an Asira of Skyhammer, this game's name for humans powerful enough to control and ride dragons. During a training exercise for new recruits, your base comes under siege by a sorceress and her fleet of doom dragons, knocking you and your captain to the world below and rendering your character without their memories, because, of course. So, let's get to taking a look at the world of Eratia. What we have here, on the surface, is gonna look like a pretty generic fantasy setting. You've got mountains, dungeons, fields, forests, and most of the normal things that you'd expect from the genre, but the detail is decent and the colors are vibrant and plentiful. The environments tend to vary a bit, even when you're in the same area, so there is a bit of scenery change going on even in the first area. Combat effects get pretty flashy if you have the graphics set for them, especially playing classes like the Sorcerer, but even simple warrior classes get a bit of flashy effects, and a lot of the classes are given very over-exaggerated animations to complement those effects. Sorcerers especially twirl around their staff like they're Bruce Lee just to toss out every basic arcane bolt. It's as flashy as it is kinda silly. In my side quest, I praised the designers for going outside the box with their dragon designs, as not every dragon in the game is a traditional hulking winged lizard, but there's other versions of dragons as well, based on other animals, or on some occasions plants and insect designs. Common dragon types in the game, besides the normal ones, are what I like to call the bird, ankylosaur, mammoth, raptor, bat, and alligator dragons. However, as far as the tameable dragons I've seen in the game, they all seem to follow those general typesets, only swapping colors or tweaking the overall model. Hopefully there's more to come, at least a few more dragon types to be found and tamed later on. One final quirk about the dragon models is that they're prone to active scaling, which essentially means, and this will hold great meaning for hunters in Warcraft that have ever tamed a boss monster, that the dragons will shrink when captured and summoned, but grow to near its original size when used as a mount, sometimes right before your eyes. There's a blurry effect placed over distant graphics if you have the depth of field feature on, which is on by default. The problem with this is the fact that your character's name, displayed by default, will also become blurry if it's over a distant blurred area. If this drives you as insane as it does me, and you don't really care as much about the game's effort to hide its distant texture popping, you might want to shut off depth of field. There's some major quirks to this game, as you'll notice in the character creator, that many of the faces tend to look kinda goofy, with oddly shaped heads or eyes way too far apart to look natural, and even tweaking the settings might prove difficult to impossible depending on the face that you've chosen. At least the NPCs don't tend to look too bad. Equipping a new piece of armor tends to be a bit of a fashion gamble. Yes, this is another one of those games where lack of armor equates better stats, and outfits tend to vary from practical to suggestive to utterly absurd. Playing as a female character might adorn your character with the highly defensive battle thong or robe of the underboob. Of course, if that's not suggestive enough for you, the jiggle physics tend to have a mind of their own. Clipping issues are abound as well, with the armor pieces constantly poking out of each other or clipping into the body itself. Hitboxes tend to cause problems as well, and it's easy to get stuck on seemingly innocent outcroppings of decorative items, or getting stopped by a slightly raised floorboard on a bridge. It can get pretty frustrating and easy to forget about until you're in a bad situation. Finally, this game tends to be difficult to run for many people, I've noticed, and the game does occasionally hit you with a frame rate issue. For a reticle combat-styled game, that's always a bit of a detriment, when being able to time your dodges with telegraphed enemy strikes could mean the difference between life and death. If you find yourself having issues, try to adjust the settings the best you can before heading out into any real trouble. There's also a pretty annoying problem of the game right now outright booting you from the client, automatically closing the program and not even giving you so much as an error warning afterward. Out of all of the bugs, of which there are many, this is clearly the most infuriating. This game's soundtrack is pretty solid and very bombastic, like when the music plays you should definitely hear it. As many fantasy MMOs go, it's consisting mostly of orchestrations with a heavy reliance on horns and violins, playing to intensely loud swells, especially when in dungeons. It's a fun listen and does well to punctuate the action, but it isn't exactly breaking any new MMO ground. Sound also matches the bombastic action, each swing and attack giving off a very distinct swipe or thunderous impact, even though the sounds do remain pretty stock overall. Dragon and enemy roars will all seem very familiar, and I'm certain no new sound audio has been recorded for this game alone, with the exception of voice acting. The voice acting can be very hit and miss, not overly terrible, but generally laughable in parts as well, and it's more noticeable in the cutscenes rather than the gameplay itself. Player characters don't seem to speak much, if at all, but NPCs will have a small snippet of dialogue. This does tend to repeat a lot, and many of the NPCs have the same dialogue speeches and same person voicing them, regardless of the character. One of the more prominent voice clips I keep hearing sounds a lot like Johnny Young Bosch, but I haven't been able to confirm anything though. So, while the music is pretty good, the sound isn't offensive, but certainly nothing to set this game out of the norm. It's not unheard of for people to play this game with the sound off, or with the soundtrack you're choosing. It's your call. Once everything is patched and installed, the first thing that you're going to see is your server choices, Kronos and Lysaia, or Lysaia and Kronos, because for some reason they keep swapping the listing position. Server population is denoted by the lights on the side of the server name. You can create 6 characters on each server, which is fairly generous for a game with only 4 classes. For those who wish to find me in-game, I'm on Lysaia. Here you can also choose the channel that you wish to start on and can switch between these channels at any time. Since you shouldn't have a character unless you made one in open beta and are watching this because of reasons, go ahead and click on any slot to enter the character creator. Keep in mind if you wish to delete your character later, it will take 2 days to do so. The first screen has you choosing your class and your gender. Classes are as follows. The Guardian is your basic warrior-style class, reliant on melee attacks and heavy armor. Guardians are basically edge masters, able to wield the largest variety of weapons in the game, going either sword and board style with swords, axes, and maces, or forgoing the shield for two-handed versions of each weapon. The Ranger is a ranged physical attacker who defaults to using a two-handed bow or can opt for a one-handed gun blade and shield. Despite their basic attacks all being ranged, Rangers can hold their own in melee by using a variety of martial arts-themed special skills. The Oracle, a peculiar class that specializes in magic-focused melee attacks and wields either two-handed scythes or a floating talisman and an offhand amulet. Even though a melee class that uses cloth armor sounds like a recipe for disaster, Oracles are one of the most loved classes in the game due to their absurd amount of control and AoE skills on the battlefield, often air-juggling their opponents to death with flashy combos before the enemy has a chance to even retaliate. Finally, there's the Sorcerer, the ranged magic user wielding either a two-handed or one-handed staff. Sorcerers get a lot of flashy, high-damage single-target spells and AoE attacks, as well as some control-focused attacks that can slow or freeze their opponents. If you're wondering where the healer class is, there isn't one. Once chosen, you're taken to the character creator, a great choice of unintentional hilarity, as this is one of those creators that gives you a lot of control to make your character look as absurd as you'd like them to. Give your character pipe cleaner biceps and Popeye forearms if you want. There's sliders abound for more body parts and facial areas than you'd think there'd need to be. Which reminds me, if you choose a female character, you're treated to 5 more body sliders. Very special sliders. You know, when I started this show, I knew I was eventually going to have to talk about the infamous breast slider or boob slider. It's a source of controversy among MMO players, but it's essentially exactly what you think it is. It's a slider dedicated solely to expanding or shrinking the size of a woman's chest on your avatar. See, some people see this as developers just giving into the male perverted fantasies of people who play these games, while others see it as a simple necessity to really allow the full customization of your avatar. Now, while I've come across this in many times before, and I've mentioned the slider for a while now, this game... There's five separate sliders pertaining to the size, shape, and position of the breasts in this game. If you want to get technical, both chest width and thickness also affect breast size on females, so there's actually 7. Picking a male character removes the 5 sliders, and doing that basically feels like you're missing out on some of the content. Yet, with all these options, while you can create some seriously malformed physics-defying monstrosities, getting them to actually look decent is kind of a challenge. As with many games with this feature, even a setting of -100 equates a 34 C cup, and if Runes of Magic has taught me anything about Rune Waker, it's that they are quite fond of torpedo boobs, and this game is hardly an exception. Many times, getting the character to look the way you'd want will look completely odd when you get a certain outfit. There are a few sample outfits you can click on, but you can also customize the color of your starter outfit by clicking the color palette on the bottom. The same goes with the facial sliders, as you're not really creating a face as much as you're adjusting one of the bases that you choose. If the base face that you've chosen is inherently strange looking, it's pretty tough to get it to look good. Case in point, there's one face that has what looks like bags under the eyes, and despite whether or not you like the overall shape, those bags are not going anywhere. Make sure that you choose your base shape accordingly. Once you've had a good laugh at the character creator, you're taken to the tutorial. Is what I would have said if they hadn't removed the original one. The whole reason I know about the story of this game is because the original version of the game had this tutorial. It was this glorious 5-minute story-based event filled with hilarious voice acting, a guy punching a man in a full metal helmet in the face and then shouting, "Who are you?" Weird graphical glitches during a transformation sequence, and regardless, it set up the story for your character. I guess the developers or the publisher found it redundant, since you now start in the town immediately and are taken through the second tutorial right away. Also missing was the original feature to choose your starting town, a feature I actually enjoyed as it provided more scenery for alternate characters, but unfortunately these were also removed. Whether they will return as starter areas or higher level content remains to be seen, and if you're a former beta member who chose any of those starting areas that wasn't Purita, you'll automatically be set in Purita now. Controls are easy enough to grasp. WASD is the standard movement, spacebar jumps and double jumps, but the mouse controls the camera and steers your character. Without a reticle though, aiming in the game is very wonky, and unlike games like Neverwinter, it's entirely possible for a ranged character to fire off an attack when they have no technical target, making it quite possible to accidentally pull another enemy when you're in the midst of combat. When targeting an enemy, it'll highlight with an outline, red for aggressive, yellow for dormant, and green for unattackable, usually a scripted monster or NPC. You can assign a key to lock onto your target, which will keep the camera focused on your enemy until it's defeated, or until you cancel the targeting, but this feature is off and unassigned by default. I suggest using the T key, especially if you're a ranged character. F interacts with objects, and escape brings up your cursor mode, which might be occasionally necessary to interact with certain objects on the field for quests. Combat is as simple as clicking left or right, which rule of thumb-wise denotes a regular and heavy attack respectively. There's also skills assigned to certain abilities, slottable to the hotkeys Q, E, R, V, and the number keys. A genius feature of this is the combo system, as you'll perform different attacks depending on your class and the skills you use. For example, a sorcerer normally has a simple but chargeable water blast assigned to their right click, but if you fire off a left click arcane bolt first and then hit right click, that spell will now be a quick fire burst that causes a debuff to the enemy. If you fire off 2 arcane bolts beforehand and then hit right click, the spell changes to a massive 3 fire wheels that will cause an AoE cone in front of you, and buff your movement speed. There are many combos that are unlocked with your level as well, and even your hotkey skills might tie into another attack, like the AoE freeze, which can eventually be cast 2 more times to cause some extra damage. Learning the amount of time you have to cast a combo attack can also lead you into creating your own combo attacks by throwing in a different attack in between the amount of time you have to cast the follow-up. There's a lot more depth to the system than you'd expect. You can also dodge roll to the left or right by awkwardly holding the shift key and pressing A or D. Oddly enough, you cannot dodge roll forward or backward. If you double tap forward, you'll go into sprint mode, which will have you moving much faster than you'd expect. Both dodging and sprinting consume stamina, a yellow bar underneath your health and action points bar. If you consume all of your stamina by doing either dodge rolls or sprinting, you'll get a short debuff rendering you unable to perform either action for about 3 seconds. When starting out, you'll notice how insipidly easy it is to level up, but rest assured that pace is going to slow to a near standstill once you hit level 15 and higher. One thing about this game is that you can up your character's individual stats, gaining a few points per level, but the game doesn't exactly grant you fanfare about it, and it's easy to forget to do so. Many times I've casually or accidentally opened my character sheet by pressing C, and noticed that I had over a dozen attribute points to spend. Stats tend to be a bit confusing in this game as well. Strength, constitution, and intelligence are norms for the genre, but focus, ferocity, charisma, and dragon affinity have their quirks. Focus and ferocity are misleading in their titles, as focus sounds like it's magic-based, like focusing your mind, but it only affects physical stats, making the stat completely worthless to sorcerers. Ferocity, which brings to mind physical feral attacks, will also boost your critical chance with magic as well as your physical. Charisma boosts the amount of time you have with your dragons, as well as your dragon's base stats when it's summoned, while dragon affinity boosts your magical power, magical penetration, and magic defense, and unlike charisma, has absolutely nothing to do with your dragons. If you feel you messed this up somewhere along the line, and you haven't reached level 15 yet, you can respec those points for free until you reach level 15. Reaching level 15 also grants you access to your mastery system, which, unless your character was created far before the launch, will require you to perform a small quest and visit an NPC before you can unlock them. Masteries let you customize your character further, giving you things like boosted stats, additional skills, or even changing how certain skills will work. While you might be impressed by the amount of points and choices you have to upgrade, you'll notice just how many points are required to upgrade even the lowest tiered masteries by just one level. Think hard about where you want to put these points, as it will cost actual money to reset them. The game's looting system is pretty standard, as when an enemy dies they'll often glow with an aura, and the color of that aura denoting the quality of gear they happen to have on them, with yellow being basic and green being uncommon items. Press F to loot them, but be warned the game can be fickle about where you need to stand. Occasionally an enemy corpse will remain even after you've looted it, allowing you to search the body, which will often grant a crafting item. If the enemy no longer has anything on them, they'll just dissolve away. The inventory is painfully limited, as there are a ton of differing equipment pieces, vendor junk, crafting items, and upgrade items that you might find yourself feeling the need to hold on to. While you're granted a row of slots at level 10 and then level 20, it's hardly enough to stockpile the amount of crap that this game will dump onto you, making frequent trips to the vendors or bank a necessity. While I haven't had this occur in a few days, there is a particularly annoying bug where an item might fail to be discarded or sold, leaving you with an unusable frozen item in your inventory, and that takes up a space. Lengthy logging off will usually take care of this, but it is frustrating as hell when it happens. Equipment needs to be repaired as well, which uses the in-game currency that only comes in one unit. Repairs are pretty inconsequential in cost, and the game often gives you more coins than you'll actually need, and the most expensive useful items, potions, are dime a dozen, often given as quest rewards. If you fail to repair your gear and break a piece, the item becomes useless until it's repaired, and if that item happens to be your weapon, you'll mostly be unable to attack. Just keep an eye out for the paper doll icon in the lower right. The game's death penalty is fairly lax, depending on who you ask. Once dead, you can choose to respawn at a nearby point, usually not too far from where you died. If you wish to revive on the spot, you can do so for free until level 15. Afterward, you'll be forced to pay 50 station cash, SOE's paid currency, or possess the phantom doll item, which can be purchased in the cash shop or earned with certain achievements. Since respawning is so often close by and mounts are practically given to you immediately, I see no real reason to revive on the spot, since the respawn rate of the enemies is pretty decently paced. So why are mounts so easy to come by? Let's get into the dragon system. First off, capturing a dragon is pretty simple, once you understand how it works. You'll have a skill called Capture, usually slotted to the 6 key, but you can move it to wherever you wish. Press that capture skill when you're near a dragon, and your character will leap onto the dragon's back, riding it similar to a bucking bronco. When doing so, a minigame-style window will pop up, featuring 2 bars, a circle, and an icon. Using either WASD or the arrow keys, try to keep the icon in or near the center circle, watching out for the occasional prompts where you'll have to mash the F or G keys in order to recover. In order to capture the dragon, you'll need to outlast it until it gets tired, represented by a red bar on the right side of the little minigame window. The yellow bar in turn is your stamina, and filling the red bar or depleting the yellow one will result in either taming the dragon or failing to capture it. Some dragons cannot be captured for one reason or another, but there are elite capturable dragons with rare spawn rates that are scattered throughout the world, and some dragons will require you to weaken them before you can attempt to capture them. That sounds familiar. Once tamed, the dragon automatically becomes your mount, summonable or dismissible by pressing the tab key. Different dragons have different properties as to how they move, with some being fast ground sprinters, some being able to glide after jumping, some that swim, and others being able to fly. In fact, the first dragon you're told to tame for a quest is a flying dragon, giving you a flying mount from the very get-go. See why I think respawning at a waypoint isn't that big of a deal? You can even double tap forward to sprint on Dragonback, even if you're flying. However, flying is limited to an extent as the game is bordered by an invisible ceiling of various height. Usually enough to get you far enough away from the enemies to just pass over them, but not so high that you can simply fly over impassable mountain ranges. The ceiling varies entirely on where you're flying, and if your flying dragon suddenly enters a glide mode, you'll be lowered to the restricted flying height. The game also features a mounted combat system that, unfortunately, was indefinitely disabled before I was able to reach the level requirement of 30 and try it out for myself. Hopefully that gets put back in some form soon, as I'd love to try it out. Alternative to using the dragon as a mount, it can become a combat pet by pressing Alt and the coordinating function key, i.e. Alt F1 or Alt F2, for your 2 free active dragon slots. You can also unlock up to 6 active dragon slots with an increasing amount of station cash. You can imagine how nervous I was the first time I had to summon a dragon by pressing Alt F4. Summoned dragons only remain for a minute or two unless you stack a lot of points in charisma, and once the timer expires they'll go on a minute-long cooldown and cannot be resummoned or used as a mount. If the dragon falls in battle, that cooldown increases to 3 minutes. You can temporarily halt the cooldown by hitting tab to mount up on your dragon before the timer expires, as long as you're not in combat, but the dragon will not have its full summon time back if you choose to summon it again until it's had at least a minute to rest in inactive or mount mode. In summon mode, dragons also have combat skills that they'll use at random, and some dragons will possess Dragon Soul skills, which are spells usable by your character that can be slotted to your hotbar, as long as that dragon is in your active dragon party. Slotting a new Dragon Soul skill will reset your Dragon Soul points, which replenish slowly over time or faster when you're attacking. These skills range from simple attacks to instant and AoE healing spells. The skill Downpour is seriously one of the most useful and overpowered heals, as it grants you 10 seconds of health and AP regeneration and has a ridiculously low cooldown to use, while spells like Sacrifice will remove your action points pool to instantly restore your health, making it pretty useful for physical-based classes. You can manage your dragons with a P key or by visiting a Dragon Lair NPC. The Dragon Lair will allow you to store 2 dragons for free and up to 6 with station cash, as well as store 6 more dragons for free in the Dragon Chamber if you happen to be a collector. While dragons stored in the chamber have no use beyond just being stored and cannot be equipped with items, dragons stored in the lair have several functions, including training their levels to upgrade their stats, training their individual combat skills, or gathering several crafting items. It costs a bit of in-game cash to send a dragon away on 5 hours worth of tasks, but if you wish to increase that to longer than 5 hours, it will require station cash. Yes, again, you can imagine I'll have a lot to go over in the cash shop. You can even upgrade the dragon's stats here, depending on the level that they've reached, and send 2 dragons off on field training, where they'll have a chance to learn each other's combat or elite skills. Elite skills being specialties in certain crafting professions or training modes. A dragon can only be trained to level 25 unless you earn a token by sending off a level 10 or more dragon to the academy, in which you'll lose that dragon but be able to increase the max level of another. Dragons can have their name changed once for free, and any subsequent changes require a station cash fee. Despite creating a few of my roleplay characters in this game, I still felt it necessary to name 2 of my dragons Tanky Tankerson and Hulk Peacockface. Since crafting items can be gathered by dragons in the lair or by finding nodes, crafting itself can get fairly convoluted, and crafting requires you to find the appropriate station to perform each task. For example, some materials are useful for multiple professions, but you'll only earn crafting experience per profession. If the Doron grass herb is no longer earning you experience for the level of alchemy that you've reached, you can still earn experience if you haven't put any into cooking yet, by making the exact same items. Crafting is something that will require a lot of effort to be worth the payoff, and when the game is practically throwing potions and gear at you, it's sometimes really hard to justify the effort unless you just really like the idea of crafting. Items can also be upgraded with the Soulcast Artisan NPC, so we'll upgrade the items for a bit of in-game cash, with a dropping percentage of success each time you succeed. Failing to upgrade will lower your item's max durability, but the same NPC will allow you to restore that durability with a much more forgiving 80% success rate, so there's little risk to upgrading if you have the coins for it. I've made a level 20 staff outperform every staff I had found until level 30 through this system. Items can even be broken down for parts from the menu, granting you crafting items as well as a chance to receive a higher quality item recipe and gems that will boost the success rate of your upgrades. One final upgrade option is the Dragon Shards, which are thankfully the only looted item that gets its own bag of infinite space, and can be slotted to your equipment with the J key. The shards can also be combined to form more powerful Dragon Shards at the Soulcast NPC. You can also remove these shards at the same NPC. Quests follow basic MMO protocol: kill X, find X, travel to X, and they're split into categories. Story, denoted by yellow icons, are usually involving cutscenes or scripted dialogue events. Green for normal quests, and blue for the daily quests, which you can gather the materials for regardless of whether or not you accepted one. Dailies also earn you a currency usable as an alternative to station cash in some places, but can only be performed 10 times a day. The game also features Guild Wars 2 style dynamic events. You fill up a bar and everything. Occasionally, quests might require you to kill an NPC or enemy that will only appear during a dynamic event, so be wary of this. Dynamic events are marked on the map by a shield and crossed swords. Fast travel beyond mounts exists in this game, as you'll find transportation NPCs, which you can use as home points for your Hearthstone-style translocation skill, which has an hour-long cooldown. These NPCs will also port you to unlocked cities within an area for a small fee. You must register with the NPC to activate them as a home point. Later on, around level 30-ish, or about the time you're ready to leave the first area, you'll have to board an airship which acts like Warcraft's boat and zeppelin system to get to the next area. An oddity about this is that the game will not let you transport on an airship unless you're on Channel 1. As you play, you'll unlock achievements, some of which reset daily, and all grant some level of reward, from a simple amount of coins to additional titles, and even cash shop items. Press I to enter the list, and if you have any exclamation points on any of the categories, you have rewards to claim. I've spent a lot of time on this game and only barely got out of what most people would call the starter area at level 30. To be fair, I would consider the noob area of this game to end by the time you reach the second town, and the scenery of the area does change quite a bit as you advance through it, but just be prepared to spend a lot of time in Pyrita when you start out. Now, let's get to meeting the locals. I find this chat interface really kinda strange. It's defaulted to be really small, tucked away in the corner. It could also just be my account, but the all chat rarely seems to actually display all the channels, and for some extremely weird reason, it refuses to show system messages in that tab, which is arguably the most useful chat log, as it'll tell you what you've looted and how much XP you got for a kill. Also, keep in mind you'll have to switch your chat channel by pressing the color splotch next to the chat block, with different colors representing the channels of Say, Zone, Party, Raid, Guild, Alliance, Whisper, and World. World chat carries across the entire game and requires a cash op item to send messages in, so thankfully it's not swarming with idiocy. What shocks me further is the fact that the second largest chat channel, Zone Chat, is also not swarmed with idiocy. I have yet to recall a time anyone was being a jerk to anyone else, and more often than not I see civil conversations, or merely frustration with the game's issues, which for once don't devolve into angry rants between the detractors of the game and sycophantic fans defending every flaw as a quirk. People tend to be fairly helpful, if they speak at all. Instances, at least the first two that you run across, are shockingly soloable, and while entering one prompts you to choose a difficulty, as of now there's only one to pick. Bringing someone else into the instance will unquestionably make it easier though, and when you head into the instance as the party leader, your party members will receive a prompt asking if they wish to teleport there. For a station cash fee. Probably better they just hoof it. Instances tend to follow the MMO tradition of being littered with enemies until you reach the boss. Defeating the boss will usually grant you some decent gear drops and the ability to teleport out of the instance immediately rather than having to walk back. Keep in mind that many of these instances have daily quest NPCs that will ask for specific instance drops. The Tangaroa Mines daily is ridiculously easy to grind, by the way. Parties are actually rather useful for straight-up level grinding, as enemies will unquestionably go down easier, the party shares kill experience as long as they're reasonably close by, and most notable, kill experience pales in comparison to quest experience, so having a partner will cause you to fly through these quests, and a bit faster through the levels when compared to going it alone. Type /invite in the character's name to invite them to your party, or you can right-click their name if they're on your friends list. The game also has a guild system, which only requires about 5,000 coins to start a guild with a maximum of 50 members. Guilds can gain levels and experience by performing guild achievements daily, and raising guild levels will allow for higher guild membership totals and added bonuses like guild banks, boosters, and housing. If you wish to join my guild and help get this thing a bit more well established, we're Grindstone on the Lasaya server, with my character Cian as the guild leader. As you can tell from this image, I take it very seriously. You can apply for the guild at any guild NPC as long as you scroll down to find it and click Apply. Unlike Wushu, you don't even have to be online for someone to accept the application. While I was unable to reach the housing system in the game, it's shown to be one of the more complex systems, involving fully customizable furniture layouts and other bonuses, so if that intrigues you, look up what's all available. While the game features the tried-and-true auction house, an interesting feature is the market research button, which, when buying or selling an item, will show you the average prices that the item sold for each day in the month. It's a nice feature to help you from being ripped off, or ripping yourself off when selling off your items. The game hasn't exactly opened to much in the way of fanfare, with people still fully engrossed by Final Fantasy XIV and the upcoming Elder Scrolls Online and EverQuest Next. Dragon's Prophet is kind of a nobody right now, and the low population seems to reflect that. It's not that there isn't people playing the game, as you'll see a few, but the game is hardly swarmed with players at the moment. It's as peaceful as it is worrisome, and perhaps SOE could go a bit harder on the marketing of this one. Though the power metal themed trailers on YouTube are a gloriously corny step in the right direction. Seriously, look them up. I've only said it about 500 times, but this game uses SOE's station cache system, which sell for 1 point on the cent, with some discounts for buying them in larger amounts. So if you have leftover points from quitting DCUO, you have another place to spend them. And spend them you will. As if the previous mentions didn't clue you in, there is a ton of stuff that this game asks you or allows you to pay for. There's prompts to pay when you revive, when you teleport, when you want to have a better chance at crafting high-quality items, when you want to upgrade your bag, bank, or dragon slot space. That Station Cache logo will show up, and it's turning quite a few people off of the game. Now, as for Cash Shop, it's pretty much all the basic. There's the XP boosters, the starter packs, the cosmetic outfits, and what have you. Cosmetic outfits act in an interesting way, overriding the look of your current equipment, with the only exception being that weapon skins will only display if you have the same type of weapon equipped, unsurprisingly. If you happen to like the look of a certain armor piece, you can purchase a costume conversion elixir to transform an armor piece into a costume piece, sacrificing its combat stats, but you can slot an extra dragon shard into a costume if it has the energy level for it. You know the difference between a role player and a power gamer? A power gamer will use a costume transformation on their super badass spike-covered level billion uber raid gear, while a role player will use it on the starting outfit. While I think the major exception of the limited dragon slots and bag slots weighs down free players the most, a lot of other paid features are easily ignored, benefiting little more than convenience. There's little I would consider, pardon the unintentional pun, draconian like SWTOR's original system, but shoving the cash prompt in people's faces to capitalize off the absurdly impatient seems to be driving away players who just don't like to be harassed by those sort of things. It's your call, but there's at least a few things I'd consider worth paying for if you enjoy the game enough. I'm not sure if I've made this clear enough, but this game is hardly ready as a launched title. It's swarmed with bugs and technical issues that, while being constantly repaired, are things that you would have hoped would have been ironed out in one of the beta phases. However, the game has improved vastly since the open beta, and updates and bug fixes are going on constantly. If I haven't made it entirely obvious, I quite enjoyed this game, and as shown by my love of The Secret World and Age of Wushu, I'd rather play a bug-ridden game that tries things differently, or at least puts interesting spins on existing formulas, rather than a polished game with standard unevolved gameplay. Here's my final rating. The one thing I always despised about reticle combat systems was the fact that I was still merely assigning skills to hotkeys, except now I had to steer the camera and click to attack. The combo system of this game gets about as close to an open-world Vindictus that I've seen, allowing you different attacks depending on what skill you use and when you're using it, opening a plethora of personal combos and playstyles that will cause you to rethink your combat strategy on the fly, and do your best to maximize your damage output. This game relies a slight bit more on skill than it does gear, and players who achieve the best balance of offense and defense will have no problem playing solo, even if the game is much more fun with a small group. It allows both kinds of players to hold their own with little penalty. Finally, it has tameable dragon pets, lots of them. It's practically a combination of Pokemon and How to Train Your Dragon, so if that thought alone intrigues you, go ahead and give this a shot. Then again, if that's the case, you probably went ahead and installed this game right around the time I said ride dragons. If you are dragon collecting obsessed, the 2 active and 2 layer dragon slots are not going to cut it if you want to catch them all. So your first thought about paying for this game will probably immediately drift towards getting more of these dragon slots unlocked. If your inventory is getting choked, and unless you sell everything you're not wearing, it will, bag slots will also be well-placed cash in this game, especially if the level 10 and 20 rows barely help your item hoarding. Keep in mind both dragon and bag slots only unlock on one character, so unless you plan to fork over a ton of cash, choose wisely if you're an altaholic. Finally, the ability to convert items to costume pieces is always a nice touch, even though a few other games have offered the exact same feature for free. If you're fond of looking more like a warrior and less like an exotic dancer, or vice versa, the option is there if you want it. I have no idea why this is being referred to as launch. There are beta-level mistranslations, constant content reworks and removals, and other things you think would have been taken care of before this game even reached open beta status. There's bugs abound in this game, ranging from hilarious to inconvenient to hell with this game level, and you never know what you're going to come across. You'll be spamming the report bug feature for more often than you'd hope in a launch title. As such, be it fairly quiet marketing or fervor being placed towards other titles, this game is relatively empty. Rarely do I run into a server with even a level 2 population, and while it's nice that we'd rather play in peace away from crowding and jerkishness, it takes the massively out of MMO, and you might be forced to bring friends along or join a guild if you want to run into more than a dozen people playing at a time. Finally, getting bombarded with constant cash shop prompts can wear thin on a lot of players, and even if many of the features being asked for are rarely worth the investment, it comes across less like it's providing you with convenience opportunities, and more like a game that's constantly asking you for spare change. I would completely sympathize with anyone if they have a problem with that, and if you do have a problem with it, I'd advise you not bother with the game until there's a way to remove those prompts. Next time, perhaps I should stick around SOE's fare just for a little bit longer.